We're very fortunate this evening to be with Johan Minnaar. Johan, very well known in Graaff-Reinet. We call him Johan Oog because he runs the optometrist. So everybody in Graaff-Reinet knows Johan. What not everybody knows is that Johan is one of the leading history buffs in Graaff-Reinet, and he's very kindly agreed to tell us about some of the stories and some of the characters of old Graaff-Reinet. So we're going to cross to Johan now.
So in the late 60s, the town council of Graaff-Reinet decided that it was time.
So it's the late 1960s.
Yes, the late 1960s. The Graaff-Reinet town council decided that it was time for Graaff-Reinet to have a sewage system installed. Now you must bear in mind that when developments are built now, the services are installed before the building commences. But Graaff-Reinet was established in 1786. And by the 1960s, every house and every business in this town had a septic tank. There were a few properties on the fringes that still had the bucket system, but generally it was septic tanks. And John Gardell, our local pharmacist, who was a very well-known man in his community as well, a very good storyteller too, told this lovely story about so what happened is that so you can imagine Graaff-Reinet was in chaos for 2 or 3 years because they had to dig up all the streets to put down the sewage lines, and every property had to be dug up because sewage pipes had to be laid from the kitchens and the bathrooms to the main lines in the streets. And then every property owner could either have the municipality remove the effluent from their septic tanks, or they could do it themselves. And at John Gardell's pharmacy, his messenger had a son who was in and out of trouble all the time, and John felt it was his duty. He wanted to give him a bit of a head start, wanted to employ him, summoned him to the pharmacy, and explained that he, John Gardell, had drums and a pump, and that this man needed to rent a donkey cart and donkeys, and if he would then remove the effluent from the septic tank at the Midland drugstore, then John would give him 600 Rand, which was an enormous amount of money in 1972. And the man stared at John for a short while, and then he said, "Nee, master, los maar." And John was astonished because it was so much money, and he really wanted to help this man. And he said, "Waarom nie?" And he said, "Nee, master, geld is nie alles nie." So I think it's just such a sweet story. I love personal accounts of people in this community, and we're so rich with all these lovely stories. The other one that comes to mind is the Louther family. Now, the Louthers, a well-known coloured family, and he was a teacher and a headmaster. But he grew up where Caroline Street is. And there was a large coloured community in that part of town. And of course, with the apartheid system and the National Party laws, they were very sadly evicted and forced to move out of town. And a lot of those people moved to the small suburb known as Sunnyside. It's between town and Kroonvale. But anyway, there are two stories about William Louther. He says that when they were still living down there in Caroline Street, he and his mates were smoking in the back garden. And the policeman came past on his bicycle and saw them, and of course arrested them for smoking. And so he had his notebook out, and he said to the first fellow, "Wat is jou naam?" And he said, "William Petersen." So the policeman wrote the name down. And what is your name? Nee, William Jonas. And their names really were all William. Their formal names, their official names. And Wat is jou naam? William van Tonder. And the cop thought that they were taking the mickey out of him, and he said, "Julle speel met my en julle terg vir my. Ek gaan vir julle 'n helse pak slaag gee met 'n sweep." And then he got to Mr. Louther, whose name is William Louther. And what is your name? And he said, "Ach, sê maar Willa, meneer." And that's how he got his nickname. He was known as Willa Louther because of the cop that was about to arrest them for smoking, kids smoking in the back garden. But the other lovely story that Willa Louther told me was when they moved to Sunnyside. They lived these beautiful small suburban homes, and there was only one electrical plug, and that was in the kitchen. So you can imagine anything electrical had to be operated from that plug. So there were all these adapters. And his mother was unwell. She'd been unwell for years and years with a heart condition. And it was clearly arrhythmia. And she was constantly at the doctors and always on different medication. And then it would there'd been improvement, and then she would deteriorate again. She was always unwell. And one evening she was in the kitchen wanting to do some ironing. And she then plugged the iron into this setup of multiple adapters from the only electrical plug in the house, which was in the kitchen. And there was this almighty flash, and she was electrocuted, briefly. And she said, "Hi, maar nou voel ek lekker." And Willa says that she never ever went to a doctor again after that. And every time that she felt unwell, she used to go poke her fingers into the electrical plug in the kitchen and get a shock. And that sorted her out for the rest of her life. Isn't that a gorgeous story? He was a wonderful man, absolutely marvelous. And he would laugh, at the antics of the white-colored relationships and all that sort of thing. He rose above all of it in spite of all the traumas. Yeah. The other gorgeous story fabulous story about the Luckhoffs. And, in those days, this is in would have been about the 1930s, 1940s. It was considered, as we have all kinds of vitamin supplements to boost our health. In those days, it was penguin eggs were considered that was just the very best supplement you could have for good health and longevity. And Archie Luckhoff, who was a very well-known businessman and a very successful man, he was on the farm and he called to Cape Town to order his order of penguin eggs. And they had visitors at the time, and that's how the story got out. And so he called Cape Town. It was a very bad line, it was the old telephone system. And he said, "Hello, there's Archie Luckhoff here." And the little girl at the other end said, "Wie is it now?" And of course, he was immediately annoyed because everyone knew who Archie Luckhoff was. So he said, "There's Archie Luckhoff Sierplaas. Wie is it, meneer?" "Archie Luckhoff Sierplaas, Graaf Renet. En ek wil 5 dosyn pikkewyn-eiers hê asseblief." And meneer Archie wie? You can imagine this. "Archie Luckhoff, Sierplaas," and this was carrying on. "O, is dit meneer Luckhoff van Graaf Renet? Ja, meneer, hallo. Wat kan ek vir meneer doen? Ek wil 5 dosyn pikkewyn-eiers hê." And this conversation, eventually, he got the order through. And when he put the phone down, his wife, Amy, said, "God, tot die pikkewyne weet wie's Archie Luckhoff Sierplaas, Graaf Renet." Archie Luckhoff was a well-known philanthropist, so a very successful businessman. Liked the attention. He was a public figure and very self-important, but a philanthropist of note, and he supported many people and many organizations in this community. He was an avid moviegoer, so he would come to town every weekend. He owned that beautiful home in Cypress Grove. It looks similar to the Wheatlands homestead. when you enter Cypress Grove and you turn right on the next corner, that was his townhouse. And we would be in town every weekend because there were always two movies on weekends. There was the Gem Bioscope in Caledon Street, and then Mr. Ferdy Rayful showed movies in the town hall on a Saturday evening. So he would come to town to see the Friday night movie and the Saturday night movie. But the acoustics in the town hall are dreadful, as you know. And there was a particularly good movie, and he was livid because he couldn't hear he couldn't hear what the actors were saying in this movie. So he built his own movie house, the Plaza. That from being annoyed at the acoustics in the town hall. And he built the Plaza on Market Square, his own movie house, and put Mr. Ferdy Rayful in as manager. And then later years, Mr. Rayful bought the Plaza from him.
Thank you, Johan, for those colourful stories of some of the characters of Graaf Reinet. Please join Johan again next time for more of the same.